Hello once again, watchers of Good TV. My name is Nick Pell, and this is once again coming from my white room, and today I am here to talk about Season 1 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So obviously there will be immense spoilers in this review, so if you have not seen the complete season so far, probably stop watching here and go watch that because it's really, really good towards the end of it. There will also be spoilers from Captain America Winter Soldier because of events which happened in that film which are incorporated into the latter part of the season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So if you have not seen that and you don't want things spoiled for you there in that regard, probably don't watch this as well. So getting into it now, the first part of this season started off fairly slow, to be fairly honest, and I think the reason that this had to happen is because we had to be introduced to all of these characters, because the only one that we knew was Coulson, and that's it. All these other characters are fresh faces, they're completely new. We knew nothing about them before this show started, and so in order to help us to understand their characters and their motivations and their backgrounds and all that type of stuff, we have to have a few episodes where they do that and they show us what these people are capable of and their motivations, backstories, character arcs, whatever. So in my opinion, that's kind of why the show started off kind of slow and didn't get the best reviews right off the bat. But once it started going, essentially after Thor: The Dark World hit and we got to see the elements of that movie incorporated into the show 2 weeks after its release, I thought that was really, really neat and a cool thing to do. They didn't really take advantage of it as much as they could have in the show. They had just an episode that dealt with some Asgardian items and things that were left behind from the aftermath of that battle. But I mean, it's so cool to see those elements incorporated into the show. The main plot of this season of the show is trying to figure out who the clairvoyant is, and this is an entity who is seemingly behind all of the bad things which happen to our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the show. It's someone who is touched on from the very first episode to the very last episode of the season. It's really just trying to figure out who this person is. It is revealed eventually about 2/3 of the way through the season who the person is, who the clairvoyant is, but until we find that out, it's really just a big mystery and trying to figure out who this big entity behind all these terrible things that are happening is. The first episode of the season really dived into the superheroes among us type of thing with Mike Peterson. He had these superpowers. I think he could just like jump up really high, and we got to see what happens when those powers are eventually used for evil purposes. We also got to see that in a few episodes later when we had someone who could use fire, and we saw him essentially using fire because he gets the centipede device into his neck which amplifies his powers. This is just the introduction to this whole big web, which is eventually revealed to be, spoilers here, Hydra. This is just a huge entity. This is revealed in Captain America with the Winter Soldier. It plays a massive role in the show. I found it really kind of interesting that the show started to incorporate elements of the Winter Soldier essentially the next week after the film comes out in theaters. So, I mean, if you watched the show and you hadn't seen the movie yet, you got massive spoilers thrown at you. That being said, Hydra is a huge part of this, and one of the biggest reveals in the show was that, and alongside it, the fact that Ward was Hydra. Ward is an agent who seemed to be heavily devoted to S.H.I.E.L.D. He was one of the best agents that Coulson had. He just seemed to be the right guy for the cause, like the hero of the show besides Coulson, and then he ends up being a bad guy. And when he shoots Agent Hand, that was just the huge, like, what the hell just happened type of moment. He ends up being a protege of Garrett, who is the clairvoyant, is revealed, and he doesn't actually have, like, the power to, like, send thoughts into people's minds or anything, but he has such inside knowledge of S.H.I.E.L.D. that he is able to use that technology and that presence in order to further his evil and hydratic, maybe, demands and needs. So for the last about third of the show, Garrett is the central bad guy, and alongside him, Ward is. So much of this episode is with S.H.I.E.L.D. just dismantled from the ground up. Coulson and his team basically have to go into hiding and try to work their magic without the unlimited resources that S.H.I.E.L.D. provided them, and they are labeled as a terrorist organization, and just huge things just ripple throughout the rest of the season. Eventually, Ward is found out as being an agent of Hydra. It's also kind of cool when they have guest stars on the show, because in one episode we had one of the Asgardian warriors who fought alongside Thor come and guest star as she was hunting for another Asgardian. In another episode we had Maria Hill, played by Colby Smulders, show up, and she was great because she was there for about an episode or two. She had a large presence in the show, and then she took off. But it's just cool to see these characters who we see in the films interact with the show itself. And I feel like going into season 2, this will happen a lot more often. We might see Tony Stark, Chris Evans, or Bruce Banner, maybe, I don't know. We might see some of these other characters from the films come into play in the show now that they know that it's not going to get canceled after a season. Going into the finale episode now, so if you have not seen the finale, probably don't watch this unless you don't care about spoilers. The finale is essentially Coulson's team aiming to take down Cybertech, which is the company that is financing and hurling money at Hydra. They're working under Hydra, and they're the ones that are controlling these soldiers, these super soldiers who have the computers implanted into them, which give them orders, and if they don't follow the orders, it will just blow their head off. They infiltrate this place, they shut it down. Deathlock, Mike Peterson, he is still involved in this whole ordeal. It's really sad to see him be used in the way that he is used in this show. He is such a nice guy. He wants to do good and right by his son, and then he is manipulated and essentially forced to act how he acts, and it's very unfortunate. So Coulson's team, they go in. May gets to face off against Ward, unleash all of her anger on him, and that scene is really, really cool to see. Just those two heavily trained and advanced soldiers just going at it, and they eventually win. She nails Ward's foot to the floor, and then she kicks him, knocks him out. We have Fitz and Simmons at the bottom of the ocean. They're in a crate. They think that they're going to die, and then they figure out a way to get to the top. Fitz ends up sacrificing himself, or trying to sacrifice himself, in order to save Simmons because he loves her. She ends up dragging him up to the ocean as well. I thought that they might have ended up dying, or at least she was going to end up having to drop him, and it'd be a very sad moment and everything. And then they go up to the surface, and we have Nick Fury showing up and just being there at the right time. And I just love seeing Samuel L. Jackson in anything that he's in, especially when it's Marvel-based and he gets to reenact his Nick Fury character. That was really cool. She survives. We don't really know what's up with Fitz at this point. We know he's alive, but we don't know what's going to be different about him in the next episode, or the next season. So that'll be interesting to see. With the whole face-off, we have Nick Fury, Coulson, and then Garrett and Deathlock. They are in a four-part fight, kind of, or two-sided fight. Skye ends up getting a hold of Mike's son and sends him a message that only his son would tell him. And that's when Mike realizes he isn't now in control of himself and he can take down Garrett. And that is one of the cooler scenes that happen in this show, is where he regains control of himself. He's able to just take down Garrett and just kind of end the fight that Coulson and Fury would have lost very quickly. Ward is arrested. He will likely show up again in season 2. I don't know why he wouldn't, because he was such a central character to the show. He might try to redeem himself. He might just end up being one of the main bad guys in this next season. I don't know. But I feel like this is not the last we'll see of Agent Ward. We also get some insight into Skye's parents. In one of the very last scenes, we see the woman with the flower dress. She approaches a man, shows him, assuming it's a man, we don't really know for sure, but she shows the person a picture of Skye and says that she found the daughter that he has been looking for. And so we don't know who this person is. We know that one of Skye's parents are alive, so that'll obviously be explored more in the second season, just seeing the origins of this person. Coulson is handed the keys to S.H.I.E.L.D, and he is named director by Fury. Fury has instructed him to build S.H.I.E.L.D back up from the bottom and basically just run it now. And this will be really interesting to see how this plays out in the next Avengers film, and also in the second season, where Coulson has a much more important role within the organization, and yet he will likely still go on these missions and still do all these things to try to rebuild S.H.I.E.L.D. alongside trying to take down Hydra at the same time. One really comedic scene towards the end is when we see Garrett. He gets into like the robotic upgrade chair and he acts like he's gonna be unstoppable now, and I thought for a second, oh, he's gonna be coming back, we're gonna have to deal with Garrett again, and then Coulson just blows him to bits, and it's just a very funny scene, and I really liked it, and I appreciated it a lot. And then the last scene with Coulson, he wakes up, he examines the board that Garrett was writing on, and Coulson ends up going to a wall and basically making the exact same markings. So it's possible that Coulson is going to eventually start suffering from the same issues and craziness that Garrett did when he was just fully engulfed in his madness and made those markings. We don't know really what they represent at this point. They could be star systems, they could be equations of some sort, we don't know. But the fact that Coulson is seeing them is very problematic, and it makes me very worried. But that is where the show ends, and I was very happy with it. I really enjoyed Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. despite its slow start and very tricky ability to get off the ground from being somewhat bad and sluggish to actually being really exciting and really good. I liked it. I was kind of surprised that it wasn't canceled. I enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to season 2. I like the fact that this is going to essentially bridge the gap between, well, Captain America Winter Soldier and Avengers Age of Ultron, assuming that Guardians of the Galaxy does not do something to do that itself. That's my review. Leave your thoughts on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. down here in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them and your thoughts on the season in general. Like, favorite, comment, and subscribe if you so choose. I'd appreciate it immensely. Go buy my short story called The Bridge down in the description. Down here there will be a link to the Amazon page down there where you click on and buy it. And as always, my good people, my name is Nick Pell, and once again, keep on watching.